European Union retaliates against new US steel and aluminium tariffs. United States President Donald Trump wants Zelensky to visit the White House. Good afternoon, my name is Imre Keenan. We are UATV English and English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. The European Union announced measures in response to new US tariffs on steel and aluminium imports, planning duties on over $28 billion worth of US goods, according to an unofficial statement published on March 12. The move follows US President Donald Trump's decision to impose 25% tariffs on imported steel and aluminium, reignited trade tensions between Washington and Brussels. In response, the European Commission is launching countermeasures to protect businesses, workers, and consumers from what it called unjustified US steel and aluminium tariffs. The US countermeasures could affect up to $26 billion, which is $28.3 billion worth of US goods exports, equivalent to the economic impact of the US tariffs. The retaliatory steps will be introduced in two phases. Previously suspended countermeasures, first imposed during the first Trump term in 2018 and 2020, will lapse on April 1st. Responding to US tariffs costing €8 billion in euro exports, and that is almost $9 billion. The second phase will introduce new countermeasures on April 13 in response to US tariffs costing EU €18 billion, which is almost $20 billion in exports. We deeply regret this measure. Tariffs are taxes. They are bad for business and even worse for consumers. These tariffs are disrupting supply chains. They bring uncertainty for the economy, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The Commission signaled its willingness to negotiate a resolution, saying that the measures could be lifted if an agreement is reached. Trump defended the tariffs as a means to simplify duties on metals and suggested retaliatory measures against countries imposing tariffs on United States goods. The dispute takes back to Trump's first term, actually, when his administration imposed duties on nearly €7 billion of European exports in 2018, citing national security concerns. The EU retaliated with its own tariffs on American products back then. A temporary truce was reached in 2021 under the administration of former US President Joe Biden, with the US replacing the tariffs with a quota system and the EU freezing its countermeasures. Trump's new tariffs indeed threatened to reignite a trade war with the European Commission, warning that such restrictions could disrupt supply chains and raise costs for businesses and us consumers. US tariffs threat Ukraine's industry just as well. Steel production is a key sector of our economy, the second largest source of foreign currency after agriculture. US President Donald Trump wants Zelensky back to visit the White House following talks in Saudi Arabia, where Ukraine agreed to a temporary ceasefire. Trump reiterated that Ukraine had accepted a full 30-day ceasefire proposal during negotiations in Jeddah and expressed hope that Russia will agree to it just as well. We are going to meet them, Russia, later on today or tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to work out a deal. I think a ceasefire is very important, Trump says. When asked if Zelensky would be invited to the White House, the US president responded, sure. Absolutely. The development comes after weeks of strained ties between Kiev and Washington following a heated, to put it mildly, Oval Office exchange between Trump and Zelensky on February 28th. This clash derailed plans to sign a bilateral mineral resource deal and led to the freeze of US military aid and intelligence sharing. In the aftermath, White House officials signaled that Zelensky needed to even apologize and commit to peace talks to restore discussions. On March 4th, Zelensky called the confrontation regrettable and reaffirmed his willingness toward peace under Trump's strong leadership. Following negotiations in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine confirmed its readiness to implement a temporary 30-day ceasefire contingent on Russia's adherence to the agreement. The decision marks a significant shift, as Ukrainian officials had previously warned that any pause in fighting would allow Russia to regroup and prepare for future offensives. Talks in Jeddah also resulted in Washington restoring military and intelligence support to Ukraine, immediately reversing Trump's earlier decision to suspend assistance after the February 28th dispute. The only point I want to make in this regard is when you are welcoming someone to the Oval Office, you do that not as Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Donald Trump. You do that exclusively as the President of the United States of America and a voice of 300 million of American people. So you have to act as the President of America, a mighty, worldwide, dominant power, not a thug that set up a trap to retaliate on something, on someone. Oval Office is not a place for traps. It is a place where history is being written, and Ukraine is glad that we are back to that style of conversation, we hope. Jason, as a professional in strategy, national security, and reputational politics, can you please explain me what is reputational politics after all? What is that?
So reputational politics can be a few different things. It's generally thought of though as what pertains to the person's image, so his reputation. So what that usually entails is attacks on the person's reputation, or if they've been attacked or they've been discredited,
Right.
how they rebuild that. What does that look like? And how it is that somebody can maintain a good image. So in politics, how do you build the image of being a strong leader? How do you build the image of being somebody that can unite a country? So that's what it's
Hmm.
really all about.
But I mean, right. So how Donald J. Trump is doing so far in terms of reputational politics?
So Donald Trump has an advantage. He's very well known. Everybody has an opinion about him. So there's very few people who will say, I don't know who he is, or I don't know what I think about him. There's going to be
Right.
very, very
Well,
few
that
people.
much is
People have
clear.
very
Right.
strong opinions. They either really, really like him or they really, really don't. So for his case, it's pretty clear. It's called baked in. So people already have an asserted opinion about him. And new information that they receive is unlikely to really change what they thought about him. They've already
Hmm.
decided that he is someone that they love and think is really good assisting the country, and they'll justify
Right.
his actions to come up to the conclusion that he's great, or everything else will just mount to say, see, I told you he was bad, and look, he's now done this.
Right. Right. Okay. So sliding to another question from Van. Talks in Jeddah. Cautious optimism from my point of view. But General Clark said, no, I suspended my optimism at all. But I'm not that experienced. But Russia will never accept like this 30 days of ceasefire. I think so. They wouldn't. But the point of these talks, maybe, is to get that ball into, their court as per
Alexei, my
Rubio. Is
internet,
that right?
Alexei, Alexei, wait, my internet's dying. Give me a second. I
Right.
missed your question.
Okay.
Let me try to connect to another router. Give me a second.
Okay. Now, really, we had it was the lovely part, I believe so, until the question number 3, which is about talks in Jeddah. I mean, I told you that I have a cautious optimism from my point of view. But Mr. Clark, General Clark, that you met on our stage just a minute ago, said that he's spending all his optimism and that Russia will never accept anything. And 30 days of ceasefire. But the point of the talks in general, as far as I understand, is to get the ball into Russian court, as Rubio said. And that happened. Am I right? Or am I wrong, maybe?
Well, listen, I think as a first step, it was already a good one. The fact is, the ball
Yes.
is in Russia's court. And I think at this point, it's going to be very difficult for Russia to fully reject what's come forward. One, they realize that Trump is not opposing them strongly. They already have somebody who's willing to work with them. So they have very little to
Mm,
gain by denying everything, saying that we're refusing to work on what the U.S. is
right.
proposing. I think that it will probably go forward.
So, do you believe it was really a game and everything was played that smart in a clever way with Trump and Zelensky and like Putin? Because some say Putin is trapped. He cannot refuse. He cannot agree. He cannot refuse because that will be like flushing down the toilet Trump's efforts, peace efforts, whatever they are, whatever they were. And you would not agree on a ceasefire without any territories that he wants because he wouldn't because he's Putin. and or this is just a coincidence?
I think that Putin understands that Donald Trump's a very hard person to work with, and he's someone that rapidly changes his views. This morning, I spoke with former Ambassador John Bolton, who worked with Donald Trump in his first administration, and we discussed this exact issue. What would Putin likely do? What would the U.S. likely do? And the fact is this: is that Donald Trump believes that Putin wants to work with him. Putin understands that, and he also understands that Donald Trump has more than once considered someone to be a friend and then to quickly change his view and start hating the person,
Exactly.
or the opposite, to not really like someone, decide that they love them. So that could really happen with Putin as well. Why would you want to throw away somebody who's willing to work with you? At this present moment, he's got a captive audience who's happy to deal with him.
Oh, yeah, sounds legit. But what's next? I mean, all right. Well, let me put it the other side around. A provocative one now. Okay, if you were president of the United States right now, how would you end the war in Ukraine? I mean, just in long-lasting things. How would you war? How would you end the war in Ukraine at all, if this is possible? Like you have
Well,
all the power. You're the almighty.
I think right. Right. So if you had all the power, I think that the wisest thing that can be done is the US and the Europeans have never fully maximized the sanctions that would be possible. It is possible to do much greater sanctions on Russia and to really attack their economy. And we could
Right.
militarize what we're doing to truly wreck the Russian economy. And I've always thought that was key. Why aren't we stopping the shadow fleet of oil tankers going around the world? We can block their
Yeah.
access to international waters, and we could be entering them because they're violating sanctions. So I see no problem with that. I don't know why we're not doing that. But of course, in terms of Ukraine itself, I think that the US and its allies should be arming Ukraine fully and giving everything it needs. The fact is that the Russians cannot continue this forever. If Ukraine was fully armed, so it'd be taking far less losses than it's currently taking, and it was able to do what it wanted as it wished to do it, I think that the war would
Mm,
actually end sooner. And the reason is simple: is that Russia is in a very, very weak state. And unfortunately, the Russian economy started to pick up in the past few weeks. It was doing terribly. It's still doing very, very badly. Structurally, it has massive problems. So why aren't we doing more to provoke those massive problems to become landslides that just destroy the Russian economy,
mm.
which then I think would cause Russia to have to end the war?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do we? May I return your question to you? Why? Why do you think? What is the reason? Is that indecisive? A fear? Is United States is fear Russia? Is it afraid of Russia? No, it's not, isn't it?
I think it's fear. Yeah, I think that in the case of the Biden
Hmm.
administration, simply they were too concerned with provoking Putin. They were too concerned with, as Biden said, provoking World War III or a nuclear war is the other thing he worried about a lot. And I think that was very misplaced. The fact is, Russia is not in a position to be provoking much more. If we were to have given Ukraine what it needed in the first months of this war, I think that they would have undoubtedly not only ejected the soldiers who were coming in to invade, I think they would have regained the territories that have been occupied since 2014.
All right. Well, but let me ask a question that I would love to ask to Mr. Volker, but I also would love to hear your answer about. Mr. Volker says that there are three pillars for ending this war. He says the first one is sealing a ceasefire as soon as possible, right? Second one is establishing deterrence mechanisms so Russia does not attack again in a few years, and the third one and final, securing a much greater European contribution, which is happening now. So my interest lies in the in question number two: establishing deterrence mechanisms so that Russia does not attack again. What mechanisms are there? Is it NATO? I don't think so. So, what are the deterrence mechanisms that can hold Russia from another invasion, from another war? Do you think?
Well, I think that the obvious problem that we have at this point is that Russia cannot be trusted. It routinely violated all the ceasefire agreements and all the other agreements it's had with Ukraine, going back for years and years. And why we would assume that this time they're not going to do that, I think is
Exactly.
just absurd. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think anyone who studies
Absolutely.
Putin would come to the conclusion that the guy's
Yeah.
honest. He's someone we could do business with. But so I think security guarantees are obviously necessary, as is, I think, also to have peacekeepers that are coming from the Europe and from the US, because ultimately, and when you are keeping peace, your peacekeepers will be attacked. I mean, that does happen. And I think at that point, it would be something that Russia would be really playing with fire. Because if let's imagine they were to fire on or attack soldiers from a NATO country, that could really complicate things. So I think that's the only way to really guarantee peace. Just to hope that Russia will abide by their good word, I think is just lunatic.
No
It doesn't
one
make
is
sense to me at all.
expecting it. Right, right. No. That was the reason why I was asking this question. No one is expecting Russia to by their own word. No, no, of course, never happened before. So there is no any background and signs that it will happen in the future. So, what do you think is going to happen next in next couple of weeks? Because Russia will never accept peacekeepers. I mean, we can discuss it, and this is really a deterrence force. I agree to that. But if Russia says no, what happens next? Do you believe that Donald Trump will give Ukraine the weaponry it needs and the time and the money and to make Russia actually play by the rules, by American rules, by the rules that have been negotiated just recently in Jeddah?
So the fact that Trump has not engaged the Europeans in these negotiations and chose to directly engage with the Russians and with the Ukrainians, I think is probably not a good sign, because I think that means he's not really thinking about the peacekeepers. If you were thinking about peacekeepers, you would have to invite the Europeans, because they're the ones that would have to send the soldiers and the equipment. So if he's not engaging them, that's probably not a great sign. But going ahead, I think that we'll have to get to a point where this comes on the
Mm,
table. And I think it's going to be a central issue. Russia absolutely will
mm,
oppose this. I agree with you totally. But the fact is, there's no other options here. And I think it would look very bad for Trump ultimately to just give in to Russia's demands. I think peacekeepers are definitely coming. And I think the way that that could be argued to Russia, or the way that could be presented to Russia, is that if the war is not made cold now, or paused or stopped, then ultimately Europe will be sending soldiers to perhaps even assist the Ukrainians in fighting back the Russians. So would you prefer the Europeans there on the battlefield, or in the capacity as a peacekeeper? And I think that Russia would prefer to see them as peacekeepers.
great. Well, yeah. Thank you so very much, Jason. I mean, we see what happens in the next couple of weeks, but I totally agree with you. And if, in terms of that question that you just asked, Mr. Putin, I think that you will go all in. I would say, yeah, you would you say, let's do. We're the great, mighty paper tiger Russia, whatever he thinks he is, and but we'll see. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want that. But I don't see any signs that Putin will ever agree to anything. He absolutely believes that he has all the upper hand on the battlefield and in politics. And Donald Trump actually helped him with that recently. Now, maybe not so much with this, let's call it Jada trap, but we see.
Listen, it's going to be a short period of time. I think it'll all become very clear. And what's the most important thing, I think, looking ahead at this, though, is the fact that Donald Trump, we're trying to analyze why he does this or what he's proposing, is that he wants to end this quickly. And I think that at the end of the day,
Mm,
things that might seem totally irrational or not like a great solution, they're probably not great solutions. We shouldn't try to overanalyze. There's a strategy behind it. And just understand that he's, at this point, doesn't really care. He just wants to see this over with. And so I think that
right.
we're going to see a lot of missteps. And that's why the Europeans play a key role of making
Mm,
sure that the agreements are actually something that are sustainable and serious and beneficial to Ukraine.
right. Well, I mean, to that, well, let's find out in next. What choice do we have? We will find out. Thank you so very much, Mr. Smart. Again, an exquisite pleasure talking to you, and hope to do it again soon. Thank you. Well, that was it for tonight. And my name is still Henry Keane, and we still are UATV English and English speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. So please like, share, and comment and return your voice notes, because it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Stay safe and see you tomorrow.